Hello, beautiful people. It's your girl back once again. Welcome to our weekly dose of God and, of course, a lovely word with God. Welcome back to another episode of our weekly dose with God. We are happy to have you here today. Once again, welcome back. Our topic today is take the action. Take the action. And we are reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 15. If anybody is a little familiar with the book of Genesis, it's about Abraham and his covenants with God, or God with his covenant with Abraham, or God's covenant with Abraham, however you want to put it, but it's God and Abraham. So I am going to read and we're going to kind of elaborate and see what we get from there. And also make sure y'all tune into the rest of the videos that we do post. We upload, I believe, about every Sunday. I don't know why I said I believe, like I'm not the one who. So it says in verse 15, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus, or of Damascus? Basically, because it's a question like, what can you give me? Because you haven't given me a child, and this person is going to inherit my everything? What? No way. So, and Abraham said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. How is that possible? Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. Mind you, Abraham, or Abram at the time, he hasn't changed his name yet, but Abram at the time was was he about like maybe 90 something, I believe, but he was getting pretty old. I wouldn't say he's 90 because I think they had Isaac, sorry. They had Isaac at 100. I know they were older. I'm not too sure. Bible scholars, please help me out in the comments. But I know he had him at old age. So imagine somebody who is about 89, 90 having a child. It's kind of unbelievable. And they too thought it was unbelievable at a point. But then because it was God, it became believable because it did happen. So yeah. It says, then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, so shall your offsprings be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. All right. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? ? Right. So he's like, how can you be so sure that I will gain possession of this land that you're telling me to look at? Right. So we all ask questions sometimes. We all want to know, like, okay, God, you said I'm going to be this. How is that even possible? Seeing as this is the background that I'm coming from, seeing as this is the kind of family line that I'm coming from, seeing as these are the kind of people that I hang around, how am I going to make it to presidential, presidential status if I'm literally in the village in Nigeria, not without any help? How is that possible? So the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all of these to him, cut them in two, and arranged the house opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds of prey came down on the carcass, but Abram drove them away. And the sun was settled, and Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick, dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. but I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. Great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation of your descendants, or fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. And this is verse 17. When the sun had set and the darkness had fallen, a fire pot was with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces, meaning the pieces of the offerings that he kind of set down, right? The birds and the ram and the heifer and the goat. The fiery torch just basically blazed through that. And on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham. So he brought an offering and God made a covenant with him. And this is what the covenant was. So it says, God made a covenant. The Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said, to your descendants, I give this land with the Wadi of Egypt, of the great river, the Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, or Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites. I'm not really sure if I pronounced all of those right, right, but those are the lands that God said that your descendants will basically take possession of. And that is the end of that verse 21. And so what we want to take out of it, we don't normally read the whole chapter when it comes to like our podcast, and normally we do that for Bible study, possibly. Possibly we do that for Bible study, but not for the podcast. So take action, or take the action. So Abraham, he moved out of faith. He moved by hearing faith, by using faith. If you've heard the story of Abraham, which once was Abram, you would know he reached an old age before he had his first son with Sarai. Or Sarah, but Sarai at the time, right? So he's had a child. He had Ishmael with Hagar, but that's out of Sarai's request. She was like, well, since I can't bear you a child, go and sleep with my servant, and maybe she can bear you a child for me, But once that happened, the servant now was kind of like, I would say a little jealous, like, hey, I have a child by your husband. You don't have a child. I'm the most loved. I'm this and that, kind of like a boastful kind of thing, right? And now Sarah was like, well, I don't want you here no more. You can go, right? And Abram sent her out. That's another story. That's another story for another day. And then also, right, because Sarai was so old, they didn't believe that they could have a child together. I believe Hagar was way younger than Sarai because she was her servant. So, it was easier for her to have children because, you're young, right? And it's whoever God wills will have kids, right? So Sarai, on the other hand, she was almost, I don't know if it was like about 90, like I was saying earlier. One of them was 100 when they had Isaac. So they were pretty old, and I believe they were either 10 or 14 years apart, Ishmael and Isaac. I'm not too sure, but either 10 or 14 years apart, but they were old. Even if they were in their 90s or 80s, that's still pretty old. That's still pretty old to have kids. That's still pretty old, because how long do you expect to live in order to train those kids, So some of that, even, it sounds a little selfish, but God told Abraham, even in this, in the, I wouldn't say trance, but even while he was talking to him, that he would live till a good old age, meaning you will be able to raise your son. And even at that, Sarai ended up dying before Abram. So, it's all of God's will, right? But the point is that God gave him clarity, and he believed, and he only received clarity because he was able to ask questions. So God said, I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. Abraham asked God what the reward was, because the reward that I'm really looking for was a son, but you have not, you're yet to give me that. You're yet to give me an heir for my inheritances. You're yet to give me an heir for my possessions. You're yet to give me an heir for my, just anything. You're yet to give me an heir. Right now, all I have is the guy from Damascus who is my servant. So what kind of rewards do you give? Like, what kind of rewards do you really offer? That's really what Abraham was saying. Like, what kind of rewards are you really offering me if the one thing that I want from you, you have not given me? And so even within that time from when he told God that, it was about some years before they even had Ishmael, because later on, it's like, oh yeah, God said we're going to have a child. Cool, we believed. But then now it's like the faith was kind of coming down, because within those years, they still ended up not having a child yet. And so Sarah like kind of pushed him into, okay, sleep with my servant. They had Ishmael, but still no child between him and Sarah, which is his wife. And so, but later on, they ended up having Isaac. God told him how many children he would have. By action, he believed, right? So by action, he believed. He put down an offering. The first offering was when he put down the ram, the goat, the heifer, and all of that, the birds, and cut them into pieces, or not into pieces, but cut them in two or in halves, but didn't cut the bird. And then the second one was the action that he took when he was going to sacrifice Isaac. He wanted to sacrifice Isaac. And the thing is, he didn't sacrifice Isaac per se, physically. He sacrificed him mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And that's part of faith. Faith requires us to be emotionally invested, mentally invested, and spiritually invested. And the thing is, physically as well, because without action, faith cannot actually work. Without making a movement, faith cannot work, because you have to believe. When you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, faith comes with it. It tells us it is by grace through faith that we are saved. By grace through faith that we are saved. And here is how it works, right? When we say, was it Romans chapter 10, 9-11, I believe so, when it's saying that you have to confess with your mouth. The confession is the faith, is the action. Confessing, that's the faith. Okay? And believing is the grace, because it takes grace to be able to believe something that you have not seen. So it's by that grace, you have to believe in your heart and confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord. So it's by grace through faith that we are saved. The same way it took grace and faith for Abraham to be able to believe God. And not only that, he was able to ask him questions that God actually answered. He asked him, well, how do you expect, not how do you expect, but let me pull up some of the questions Abraham was asking. Like Abraham said, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? Meaning the lands that he was saying, oh, this is going to be your land, and your offspring will dwell here, and your descendants will be mightier than the star. Abraham's like, it's sounding a little too good. How do I know for sure? And God answered him, bring an offering. When you bring the offering, I'll let you know that this will happen. But if I accept this offering, he's not saying if I accept this offering, but he accepted the offering because the flames, it said that the flames are, the torch moved past the offering. It moves through the offering. Let me actually read the verse so that I'm not messing up anything, right? So it says after, let's read that verse 12. So as the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. And this is when he had put the offering on the floor, and the carcass was the birds were trying to come prey on the carcass and everything, and he was like shooing them away. So he now fell into a deep sleep, and a thick, dreadful cloud of darkness, or dreadful darkness, came over him. And then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nations they serve as slaves, and afterwards they will come out with great possessions. You, however, will go to your ancestors. And he was kind of letting him know, hey, this is what I've said concerning you. And then in verse 17, it says, when the sun had set, the darkness had fallen. A smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. Meaning the fire, it came and passed between those pieces that he offered. So I believe his offering was accepted. So he asked the question, he brought offering, and it was accepted. And all of the things that God said would happen, happened. He had Isaac had Jacob had children, and there's more and more and more and more. We are the children. We are the seeds of Abraham. We learn more of that also. I believe somewhere in the New Testament, it also says that. Let me double check and make sure that I have the exact verse. Seeds of Abraham. I believe it says, it confirms that somewhere in the New Testament as well. Yes, it does. So it is Galatians chapter 3, verse 29. And if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's seed and heir according to the promise. So according to the promise that God gave him is that your descendants, basically, it'll be more than the stars, more than you can count. And we are part of those seeds that Abraham could not count. And that is part of what happened when Abraham believed God and decided to take the action and, sacrifice his son when God commanded him or instructed him to. Although he didn't know that God really was just testing him, he still took an action of faith and decided, let me just do this because the Lord has said that I should do it. Even though this is the only actual heir that I have, I will still do it and obey God. So in faith, we have to have obedience. In faith, we have to have obedience. Like, for instance, after healing someone, why are they still sitting in the wheelchair? After raising somebody from the dead, why are they still lying on the floor? A lot of times, so far I'm yet to raise anybody from the dead. If that's the credentials y'all are looking for, I do have the credentials because I am a believer and I do have the Holy Spirit. So the credentials are in me. It just needs to be activated. And sooner or later, it will be activated. Just wait. All right. But that's beside the point. The point right now is that the people who have, used and exercised those authorities in the spirit and have raised people from the dead and has healed the sick and has done all of these other things, that we as Christians are meant to do freely, without hesitation, without any, at ease, right? All of these things. Why have we not exercised the faith to actually move more and do some more things? Like sometimes we go out for evangelism, we see somebody sick. It's like, oh, you're sick, you have a headache. Oh, you're sick, you're in a wheelchair. God will heal you. Yes, God will heal them, but God can heal them through us. God can move them through us. God can raise them through us. God can help them through us. God, he might decide, okay, let me just come down and come heal him. But I doubt that that's something that he wants to just do at this moment, unless the rapture is actually coming. So till further notice, we are the vessels that he is using to do those works. And we have to kind of, be able to do those works when he needs us to do those works. We have to be able to move in action, move in obedience, and move with sacrifice, knowing that it's not, this is not for us. It's for the betterment of the kingdom. It helps us because we are the ones obeying. And while we are obeying, we also get rewarded because he's the rewarder of those that diligently seek him. But that's not in your forefront. That shouldn't be the first thing in your mind. You shouldn't be, doing the work of God because of rewards. That's part of what you get, and most times it's heavenly rewards. It's not earthly things, because it's better to store your rewards in heaven. Where is it that it says where a man's treasure is, that's where their heart is? Yes, your treasure has to be where your heart is, meaning our treasure has to be stored in heaven and not on earth. But back to the faith talk. Abraham had faith. Okay, his faith was activated, and then because of that, he was able to receive every promise that God has spoken on his life, because he actually activated the faith through the actions that he took when he said, when he was credited righteousness for believing God, that he would have Isaac. All right. So with that being said, Abraham still asks questions, like we were saying. Even with his faith and righteousness, he still wanted to know, and he still wanted confirmation. And so another thing is he was basically told to bring an offering, as y'all know. We won't read that verse because I actually did not have that verse in mind. But if you do want to read it, it's in Genesis, the book of Genesis. I'm not exactly sure the exact chapter, but I might be able to put it up here when I go through this video. But yeah, so Abraham, he knew God's promises. That was another thing that I wanted to mention. Abraham knew of the promise of God. In fact, God even told him about the promise of God, but yet he believed, or I wouldn't say he believed, but he ended up sleeping with Hagar, the servants of Sarai, his wife, or Sarah, his wife, right? And so that's no, even with knowing that God has said you will have an heir of your own. Maybe he thought, since I'm the one giving the seed and Hagar is the one receiving, it's still an heir of my own, just not through my wife. So I'm not sure how the thought process was thoughting or working or moving, but maybe that was kind of the thoughts that came into his mind. Maybe he thought, okay, well, we're kind of cutting corners, but I mean, it's still my seed. It's just not my wife and I's seed. But however, that's not what God meant when he said that you will have an heir. He meant you and your wife will conceive even at old age. They ended up seeing the works and the miracles of God. However, he still believed Sarah when she said, go and sleep with my servant, since I am not able to bear you that child. Go and sleep with my servant. He could have said no, I'm sure, but he didn't. And now there's Ishmael, right? And so after Hagar conceived, basically she was despised by Sarah, like I was saying earlier. And due to that, behavior that she was showing Sarah and all of the, maybe, I'm not sure if there was exactly like maltreatments going on, but Abraham basically allowed Sarai to do with Hagar whatever she pleased. So if you want to send her out, go ahead and send her out. Even though she bore my child, you can still send her out. And so if I'm to confirm, I believe they bore Ishmael at the age of 86 years old. I believe Abraham was about 86 or Sarah was 86. I'm not sure. But Isaac was born when they were 100, I believe. Abraham was 100 years old when he bore Isaac, and I believe 86 when he bore Ishmael. Right. So God's promise to him basically was to give him an offspring, and it came to pass. It came to pass, and it took 14 years. And in that 14 years, they had to be patient and trust God. I know a lot of times, even myself, I'm trusting God in a lot of stuff. I believe as Christians, we are all trusting God to do so many things, but yet we expect it to be so speedily and expeditedly and so fast. And so, right now, come here, don't go nowhere else. Better be here today or tomorrow kind of thing. And it's not always like that. Sometimes things do happen where it's like, oh, it comes so fast, the grace for speed, and you're just like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And then sometimes it takes patience. Sometimes it takes having to tarry in the presence of the Lord, having to wait and seek, and having to just dwell. And when God's time comes, you'll know God's time has come, so that was kind of Abraham's situation, even though they ended up making Ishmael in the middle of that whole waiting season, which wasn't part of the plan, but obviously everything works out for the betterment of those that love God and are called according to his purpose, right? It worked out for them. It worked out for us. It worked out for them. It worked out for us. It worked out for them. So it took a very long time. However, that teaches us that God's words never fail. They ended up having Isaac. God's word, his word never fails. He could have said it today and it comes out to pass like in 20 years, in 5 years, in 10 days, in 30 days, 2 months, who knows, right? Who knows? But we should learn to be patient and remain, keep our trust in him, remain in him and keep trusting him, because his word never fails, according to what Luke chapter 1 verse 37. Yeah, with God all things are possible. Nothing is impossible. So if he has said it, believe he will do it. Okay, if he has said it, believe he will do it. But that is all for today. I hope that we were able to learn a lot of stuff. Of course, I learn every week, because why would I be talking and I'm not learning as I'm speaking, right? And a lot of new things are coming in mind. That's why sometimes I have to think like, hold on, this is the word. This is a word. This is the word, So sometimes revelation, realization, all of that just comes out as I'm trying to talk. And if you guys are new here, my name is Olumachi. I am the host. This is a podcast episode. What we do is basically read the Bible, try to go through the Bible. Nobody here is perfect. Everybody here is reading. So we all make mistakes. We all, we all are humans. We all live in the flesh, but by the Spirit. You understand? So yeah, that is all for today. Jesus loves you. God bless you. And of course, have a beautiful, beautiful day.